Just got the questions, digging so sharp. Peeling back layers, hitting the heart. Shute podcast, blowing your mind. Every topic.
Welcome to the show, and then I'll let you introduce yourself, your credentials, and exactly what it is you do.
Okay, yeah. Never good at doing that part. Okay. What do I do? So I'm a full-time telehealth therapist. I work for a group practice that specializes in sexuality and relationships. It's kind of cool because it's to be in a group practice where everyone is specialized to do that is really cool because we learn from each other. So I'm a sex therapist, right, which is basically a mental health counselor with a lot of education around sex.
I was going to say, how much additional training do you have to, because I heard it was a lot to become a sex therapist. Like you have to have the master's in counseling, but then you have to go through, how many hours is it of additional training?
You have to complete 90 credits, CEs, just around sexuality, plus 50 hours of supervision and 100, I think it was 100 or 500 of direct client hours.
Wow. So that is a lot.
It's intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like a mini graduate program in and of itself. Yeah. So that's what I do. I mean, I have other credentials like EMDR, and I'm a certified Gottman therapist, which is a couples therapy kind of lens to work with couples. And I only work with adults. I guess I would work with an older teen, possibly. But I like working with adults.
Explain to my audience what EMDR is. I haven't heard of that name in a long time. I remember, it's almost like, it was like kind of controversial back in the day. Like I remember in my internship, I worked in a mental hospital, and one of the guys there, he called it hocus pocus, but other people swear by it.
It does feel like hocus pocus, quite honestly. It does, but I mean, it's okay. So it's kind of like, have you ever like just had like kind of a crap day and like you went for a walk and like afterwards you kind of felt better?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that like bilateral like left and right brain. Like our brain likes that stimulation. It puts us in a calmer state and we're able to process things and like create some distance. And so that's what EMDR does, but through eye movement.
Yeah, it's like a light thing, right? A flashing light or something.
You can use a light, but since I'm telehealth, I don't use a light. I just use my hand. I literally just kind of like go off screen and you follow my hand. Or I'll have people tap like this.
It's really good for trauma, I'm told, right?
Oh, it's so great with trauma. I've helped people with like sexual trauma. Some EMTs that have like had some awful experiences. Someone who was afraid of driving because of a car accident. It can help with a lot of things: chronic pain, traumatic grief and loss, a lot of different things, actually.
How do EMTs, how do they have trauma? Like, isn't the whole job trauma? Like, I would assume that if you sign up for that, like, you kind of know what you're getting into. Like, you like that kind of thing. Like, you can't be traumatized, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think the harder calls are like the babies and the children, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to perform CPR, even though you know, like, they're gone, but the family's there. And so at a good, like you have, I can see how that would get through even the more seasoned folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, children and pets. That's I don't do well when I see children or animals getting harmed. Even if it's like fake in a movie, I'm like, I don't like this. It's not right.
Yeah. That's not fun times. But yeah, I mean, I've worked with, folks that are first responders and they have their own experiences. People that are been to war or
PTSD.
Yeah. Oh, another credential. I'm like a collector of credentials. I've been a therapist for 20 years, so I've like a very colorful like job history. But my new thing is I just got my basically equivalent of associate's licensure to be a sex offender treatment provider too. So that's a whole other like.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you would actually counsel sex offenders.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a very, I don't think there's a lot of people that want to sign up for that job.
No, no, actually, a lot of the people that are doing it now are aging out. And it's hard to find therapists that are willing to work with that population that are they're post adjudication and they're registered and they're required to meet with an SOTP. Yeah.
Does that scare you as a woman that like
No.
to work with those people that they might come after you or something or
No, I mean, telehealth kind of helps.
yeah.
I'm not in person. But what I find, now I'm not working with violent
Hmm.
offenders. But a lot of the folks that I'll be working with are, I mean, they're still being charged with like rape or molestation or having like CP. Um, and so, yeah, no, for some reason, I don't have an issue working with that population because I find that they have a story, like they have their own experience, and they're not actually, at least the ones that have like the digital landscape ones, usually don't have contact offenses. So it's easier to get them into a place where I feel confident that they're not going to be reoffending. So it's almost like it's prevention, right? Yeah.
Yeah, do you think a lot of that stuff it's kind of unfortunately like the gift that keeps on giving like they were abused so then now
Yeah.
they're abusing people, right? Isn't that usually the story?
Yeah, it could be that, or it could be really an unfortunate situation where someone was like 15 or 16, there was maybe drug abuse in the home, there was little supervision, and they acted out because they were abused with a kiddo that was younger, than them. And so now they have to register as a sex offender. And it's like, okay, yeah, you're accountable for your behaviors, but they're lumped in with everybody else, right, that is offended. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's tough because I mean, what do you do with that population? Because I feel like there's this sect of society that's like these people need to be in jail, lock them up and throw away the key forever. But
Mhm.
then legally, I mean, if the judge says they've done their time or whatever,
Yeah.
then what do you do with them, right? Like, so nobody wants to give them a job or like, I mean, what are we supposed to just throw them into a shed in the middle of nowhere in society? Like they have to, theoretically come back into society. So we need people like you to try to help them assimilate and rehabilitate
Absolutely.
ideally, right?
Absolutely. And by the time they successfully complete with the sex offender treatment provider protocol, they are so equipped with self-care, boundaries. They probably have a better understanding of healthy sexuality than the average person, quite honestly. I mean, they get so much education around that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I know that's controversial, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's like again, it's
Mhm.
like you've if they are free and it's good that you're doing something
Mhm.
to try to help them and
Mhm.
hopefully yeah they don't reoffend because that's the
Right.
scary thing and then a lot of them they do have to report and warn
Yeah.
people that that's part of the
Yeah, they have an SO that they have to report to. A
they
lot
have
of them
to
have.
they have to tell everybody that they're a sex offender, right? Isn't that part of
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of
Yeah,
is that for
yeah. Well,
life or
depending on the
yeah.
charge, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. I think of it as like my supervisor kind of describes it like you're on the freeway and there's a lot of different exits. It just
Mm,
depends on a lot of different factors on how many constraints that a person has on them. There could be even monitoring software while they're under probation.
wow.
There's a lot of protections, and you're right, the average person isn't aware of all of the things that are required of them, and they have to pay for that out of pocket, which is
Mhm.
puts them kind of in an interesting position because they also have felony charges. It's hard to get a job, and they have to pay for, quite honestly, this therapy is not cheap
Mm.
either. So they really have to be committed to completing successfully. And there's some really great providers that are there to, I mean, we're here to help advocate for them to be safe because if they're successful, then the community is safer. It's a
Yeah.
win-win.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What other issues do you commonly deal with in terms of the sex therapy? Like, what is the most common issue people come to you that they would see a sex therapist for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So betrayal trauma, so having a partner cheat on you or So kind of recovering from that, or, can we salvage this relationship after an infidelity? It could be low libido, mismatched libido, healing from sexual trauma, kind of impacting your sex life. Um, a lot of another kind of niche of mine is if a person has problematic sexual behavior, and that's defined by them. So I have a lot of folks that will say, I'm addicted to porn, or I'm addicted to some sort of kink or something. And so I'm able to kind of educate them a little bit, and so that they're not self-diagnosing themselves and getting them to a healthier place that really works for them and their partnered sexual experiences.
Did you have any women addicted to porn? I've heard that is a thing.
Not yet. I haven't
No.
it is a thing. It absolutely is a thing, but I haven't had a female client yet.
But there's a lot of men that are
Mhm.
addicted to porn. I've heard that a lot of Christian men are. This is a big thing that isn't talked about a lot. But a
That's
lot of Christian men,
interesting. Yes and no. Yes and no. So the Christian men that show up that say that they're addicted to pornography, when I really kind of go down to like, okay, well, how often are you doing this really? Like, oh, twice this week. Okay. Like there's a lot for them
yeah.
because of their morals, right? And their values. Where I have another person who's like, I don't have a problem with that, and I do that every day. Like right. So I mean,
Yeah, or maybe not addiction is the wrong word. Maybe just they struggle with it. It's an issue because they don't want to do it at all, and then they find it's hard to completely abstain.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're really, yeah, I like that you're connecting the dots here, because it really is a personal, if it's a problem for the person, it's a problem,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not going to be the morality police or the thought police to say you shouldn't be thinking that or shouldn't be doing that. But I hear that you're in pain. I hear that you're really struggling in this area, and let's talk about this. And quite honestly, most folks don't have a space to really talk about these things outside of like maybe their friends, maybe. Like I mean, so coming to a safe place where you're going to be talking to someone where you're not going to get judged, you're going to get really good information and kind of dispel some myths that aren't really helpful. Um, yeah, a
What are
balance
the
to
yeah,
all
what
that.
are the facts and the myths? Because I
Yeah.
see stuff all the time on Twitter and YouTube and
Mhm.
Instagram, like videos and things, and a lot of things say like you should quit porn because it messes with your dopamine and all this.
Mhm.
And I mean I don't know all the statistics and stuff, but what are the facts and the myths?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so many. Gosh. Well, first of all, I think that when I have someone in front of me, we're talking about the facts and the myths. I want to be able to really put pornography in a place where we're being really having high literacy around it, right? It's fantasy, right? I mean, like my family, we like Star Wars, we like fantasy, right? It's not reality. And when that's your only source of sex education since puberty, it's going to paint the way that you're going to look at what is normal or what should be expected. And it's not reality. It doesn't really reflect the normal arousal response,
Mhm.
right? And so I'm going to be quite, I don't know how blunt I can be on this.
Be as blunt as you can. Yeah, no,
Okay. Um, there can be a lot of bad habits that can form from this source of information, right? Bad behavioral habits, bad kind of relational habits that can be problematic with partnered sex. So if a person is doing this in secrecy, right, and they're usually kind of like there for a very specific reason and out pretty quickly, that doesn't work for partnered sex, right?
right. Like I
So,
think what a lot of what's shown in porn is not how women want to have sex. Like 96%
no,
is like
no,
degrading to women or whatever. So it's like
right,
so
right.
men and women too, I think and not only in porn, but just in film and TV.
It's
I'm
performative.
yeah, it's all not really realistic in terms of works with women, and women are much slower. It takes longer time and all this. So
Mhm.
a lot of that is like just men and women are both kind of learning the wrong thing of how to have
Right.
sex, right?
Right. And so then you get a lot of these negative thoughts like, well, there must be something wrong with me if
Right.
I'm not orgasming, or if I'm not doing this, or I don't look like that, or, so you get a lot of these, or what's wrong with, us if she's not in the mood. Like, well, because in pornography, everyone's in the mood. Everyone's like
Right.
ready. Like, it's like, well, libido's different, right? For men and women and at different times. And you've got hormonal cycles and context, and it's a little bit more nuanced, and we're not taught this in school. We're not taught this by our parents usually. So yeah, coming to a place where you can learn about these things can really, I see people really having these shifts going, wow, why wasn't I taught this, you know
Yeah, it's a lot of what I heard another sex therapist talking about how a lot of what she learned was unlearning a lot of the conventional training and
Mhm.
traditions of what we think of sex, like especially in America or whatever. Like a lot of it was having to unlearn a lot of things that we've been brought up and taught.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think of it as like I describe libido to a lot of folks, whether they're coming here for libido or they're coming here for learning about porn addiction and how do I, have a more satisfying partnered sex life or et cetera. I kind of start with a lot of basics and education first. And I like to think of desire or libido like a three-legged stool, right? People who report having a good sex life, which by the way is 80% of the time, it's like excellent. That's our bar because we're human, Um, that folks that report having a satisfying good sex life have three things. They have intimacy, and that's emotional intimacy that requires some vulnerability, knowing your body, knowing your partner's body. That requires a level of intimacy, right? And then there's mutual pleasure. So this is something that's mutually pleasurable. Again, going back to me knowing my body, me understanding my partner's body, how to communicate really well, consent. So that's the mutual pleasure leg, and then the last leg is the eroticism. It's the orgasm. It's the pleasure. It's the fun. It's the that is what solo sex provides, or that's what pornography provides. Is the eroticism. It can never replace the intimacy and the mutual pleasure, right? And
Yeah.
that is a really important thing when I'm working with folks where women feel betrayed by their partners because they have been engaging in pornography. They feel like pornography is the other woman, right? The affair partner. And I'm never going to argue that pain is real for them. But when we think about, you can never be replaced because what you provide is intimacy and mutual pleasure. And if you haven't been given a space to understand how to be vulnerable or understand your body and advocate for yourself so that it is a mutually pleasurable experience, then you are going to feel threatened by that.
Is there another side to that? Like, so for men, it's pornography, so the woman feels like the man is cheating with the pornography. Is there a side that something that women typically do because they don't use porn as often? Is there maybe like an emotional thing, like having a friend that they talk to, like a male friend, where the husband feels like the wife is cheating on him?
Yeah, absolutely. And women are also, I mean, where the woman is the person that's not faithful. But yeah, it could be an emotional thing. It could be the taboo, the excitement of it. Usually when it boils down to it is they're not having great sex. And I want to understand why. What
Yeah.
is that? Is it because you've taken on the role of mom and mom isn't sexy, and so that it's hard for you to mentally take that hat off with your partner, but it was easier to do that with the really close coworker that like understands you and doesn't see you as a mom. Like, I mean, I want to understand what was missing here that contributed to you doing something that really was outside of your value system.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's all the, I mean, obviously there's medical things that obviously that would be something they'd have to see a doctor, but when they come to
Right.
you, it's more situational. Um,
Yeah.
and so you can explore some of those things. Like, because
Mhm.
again, I feel like it goes back to a lot of like, we're not really brought up on how to have great sex or how to do good things or to express what we truly want with each other. Like we're not supposed to talk about it, especially
Yeah.
like our parents' generation or older. It's like, you really weren't supposed to talk about it.
No, not at all. And then you add in kind of a Christian upbringing, right, where you don't, yeah, it was like sinful and bad. And so you certainly weren't gonna talk about it even. That's a whole other level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, because now it seems like the pendulum has swung so far the other way in some instances. In some instances, it's still not talked about. But there, you've got these things going on now where it's like socially acceptable, like a throuple or whatever, like or
Yeah.
open marriages or swingers.
Mhm.
Like I had a guy who's been on Rogan a bunch, psychologist, Dr. Christopher Ryan, and
Mhm.
he's very open about having an open relationship
Mhm.
and having, his wife bring in multiple male partners. And I mean, this is a very common thing for some people. Is this psychologically healthy? I mean, or is this for some people?
I think it is for some people. That's definitely a specialty. It's not my specialty. Um, but I mean, I have colleagues that are like rock stars, and that's their jam. Um, but yeah, I think what is it? I go back to the six principles of sexual health. Have you heard of that?
Refresh my memory. I don't
Okay.
think so.
So the six principles of sexual health, what I like about them is that you can kind of measure your sexuality against it, regardless of whether you're the most vanilla, ultra conservative Christian or you're super kinky, polyamorous, like role playing master slave situation.
Okay.
You could measure yourself against these six principles of sexual health, and it can fit within your value system. So, for example, right, one of the first tenets of healthy sexuality is that it's consensual. And that might seem like a no-brainer, but if you really think about it, our consent laws change from state to state on what the age of consent is. It wasn't that long ago that you could a minor could marry an adult. I think anyway, that's a whole other tangent. But yeah, I mean, so consent is
Yeah.
it's cultural, it's legal, it's movable, but understanding consent is important. So that's under kind of an extreme conservative, like you would say, like, well, that's the wife's duty. Well, that's not consent, right? Are you considering consent here? Or you're looking at a polyamorous kind of kinky couple, consent's still going to be important.
A
So you're
safe
not
word
really
or something.
saying either is healthy or not, as long as like, are we consensual adults here?
Right. Well, it seems like so you need to have that kind of routine, the safety, the security, and
Mhm.
but then to really enjoy things, you would need to have something that's the desire and arousal. You need to have something novel, right? Something that's exciting. Could be a different
Right.
situation. Doesn't necessarily have to be a new partner, but something that's like exciting for the couple, right?
Right, right. So yeah, so like just kind of going through those principles, right? It's a shared value. So like it maybe your value is novelty. Great, then rock on. You find your novelty and have a conversation about that and have that be shared, have that be understood between the couple or the throuple, right? And it's got to be honest. You have to be honest with yourself and honest with your partner about why, what does this mean? What does this experience mean to you? Right? Maybe it's very casual. Okay, as long as we're being honest with each other and we have the same shared values and it's consensual, it's non-exploitive. We have access to protection if we choose to use that or not, if that's within our value system, and it's mutually pleasurable. Boom. Okay, if you can say yes to all of that, then game on.
Yeah. Do you think it does seem like there's this other trend of that I've seen with a lot of people, like a lot of my not well, yeah, I mean, I guess some of my single friends or people that I know that are single, they're
Mhm.
just completely asexual. Like what
Yeah.
is going on with that? Do you think that
Mhm.
is that a medical issue or hormonal issue typically, or is this something in society? Or are they just seriously repressed? Like if maybe they met the right person, or what do you think's going on there?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. So if someone's coming to me saying I'm asexual, I have a lot of questions. I'm just always going to lean in with curiosity and understanding because I want to be sifting through those things that you just listed. Is it a hormonal thing? Was there trauma? Right? Is there, can we eliminate that or can we treat that? right? And is this something that they're choosing because they haven't experienced a pleasurable sexual partner experience before? One of my favorite podcasters and urologist, she kind of talks about sex as like ice cream. She's like, I really like ice cream, but I don't like melted ice cream. So like just be if I'm only offered melted ice cream, then I'm probably going to say I'm a ice creamed. Like I don't know, I'm I'm asexual. But if
Hmm.
that's all I've been offered, then I don't really know what it's like to have real good ice cream. So I want to understand like what's going on but I also want to honor that there are probably some people that just don't have that sex drive.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always really fascinating to me. I mean, you see both sides of the spectrum, but it does
Mhm.
seem like there's more, or maybe that's how it's always been. I don't know, but it's just
We
weird
just
when you
now
see
have a name
people
for
that,
it. Yeah.
yeah, you just see people who are like, this guy's like a good guy or this is a good girl. Like, why can't they meet somebody? They have no interest. I don't know. It's interesting to me. But
Right, right.
when you talk about trauma, I mean, I'm assuming that is one of the things that you do, and that's a big part. Is like working past like someone who's been raped or trauma is like what they assimilate that experience into kind of who they are. Like, there's
Mhm.
no finish line. Like they can't just get over it one day, right? It's kind of like learning to regulate the emotion. Is that kind of what you do with that?
Yeah, so regulating their emotion, understanding what their triggers are, their partner understanding what their triggers are, and kind of knowing where that line is. And yeah, a lot of kind of mindfulness, emotion regulation. And first and foremost, like, I mean, I'm never going to push someone. They have to want to work on this, right? They have to want to, like, okay, there's going to be a monicum of discomfort. And I kind of call that like that window of distress. And there's going to be some distress. And as long as we're in that window, we can work with that using mindfulness tools and communication tools and understanding when to stop or slow down and communicating that to your partner. But I never want you to disassociate, which is a common symptom of trauma, which will just re-traumatize you and your
Hmm.
partner because your partner doesn't want to be a source of your trauma. And you certainly don't want to get so elevated that you're having a panic attack.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard that like smells is something that you need to be really aware of. That can really remind someone of the trauma because our
Yeah.
olfactory sense is one of the strongest senses. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Out of the five, that one is really close to the memory center of the brain. And so that can really trigger someone.
So for partners who maybe their partner has been raped or through a trauma, how can they best support their partner working through something like that?
It's patience. It really takes someone really secure in their own sexuality, to have the patience. This isn't going to be something that's going to change overnight, you know. Um, I think that's probably the hardest part, right? Because in some ways they have to pump the brakes on what they're desiring and wanting to do, and that's going to have a toll, right?
Yeah, and it's crazy because sometimes that happens. This is maybe something that happened before the person met
Right.
their partner in the relationship, and then other times it could happen during the relationship, right? I mean, they could be in a relationship for 5 or 10 years and then a trauma could occur, and
Mhm.
now they're in the middle of a relationship and they've got to somehow find a way to work past that.
Oh, sure. Or even, I think even more common is they started off with a healthy sex life. And then as the relationship became more serious and more like, okay, we're like family, like this is it, then that's when the trauma starts to show up.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
because the majority of sex abuse cases, it's someone you know, and it's probably a family member or someone close to the
Oh.
family. And so as you get from just this exciting new person to this is my life partner, they become under kind of like unconsciously part of family. And
Hmm.
now family wasn't safe,
Right.
right?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like is this something, I don't know if this is something you deal with or you have dealt with yet as a sex therapist, but just like weird fetishes and things like that? Like have you seen that new movie Baby Girl?
No, I haven't.
Oh
Uh-uh.
my gosh, you should see, this is like part of your field. Like this is
I'm so
it's
writing
the
this down.
strangest.
Baby girl. What? Okay.
Yeah, it's with Nicole Kidman. It was nominated for some award. It was just one of the
Oh,
weird.
I've heard about it. Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
It's one of the weirdest movies. Like, so like she's a CEO, so she's like really in charge and stuff. And then there's this intern, and he kind of like takes charge, and he's like, "You want to be told what to do?" And she's like, "Oh, okay." And so he's like making her like get on all fours and like lick milk in a
Humiliation.
dish. Yeah, just weird stuff like this. But she likes it. She's like into it. I'm like, this is the weirdest freaking like. To me, I didn't find it like sexy or anything. I find it just really like cringy to me. But I
Mhm.
mean, this is a thing, right? People like this
It's a thing.
weird
It's a
stuff, right?
thing. Yeah, it's totally a thing. But again, right, if you think about those 6 principles, hey, it's consensual, it's
Yeah.
non-exploitive.
Where does that come from? Trauma? Or I think in the movie, I think they
It's
were even
not.
told.
That's a myth, right? To
Okay.
say like, oh, if you have these kinks or like the people in BDSM community have a higher rate of, that's not true.
Hmm.
That's not true. Yeah.
So where does it come from? Like, why would somebody want to be treated like a dog, or like, I just don't understand it. It's interesting, but I don't understand it.
It's a power control thing. It could give a person a real sense of satisfaction to be able to surrender and make yourself vulnerable. That's a high level of vulnerability when you think about it. Like, wow, like that's to be like, I'm trusting you to know what my limits are, to put me in that place. Like that's yeah. Like folks that have like a lot, like a high stress job where they're making lots of decisions will want to be a submissive in their sex life because it's like it's the exact opposite of what they're satisfying outside of the bedroom.
So fascinating, though. It is just so interesting to me, to the psychology of
I'm
people.
speaking in generalities. I mean,
Yeah, but this is like, but this is kind of like normal in a way, right? Like, I mean, or common, I guess, like you would say.
I think common. I yeah.
I mean, it happens, right? Like, because you
It's
don't
a
see it
thing.
on
It's a
TV and
thing. Yes.
movies, but
Yes.
it's got to be that they've got to be getting that from somewhere. Like, there must be like
Yeah.
dominatrix. That's a thing. People hire
It's a thing.
dominatrixes and things,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, or have some of my folks that struggle with compulsive sexual behaviors. Some of them will find that they start going down these rabbit holes in pornography where now you're being exposed to all these fetishes that you normally wouldn't have entertained, and now like you're curious about them. So I guess like in some sense, like their exposure to um, more taboo could lean them towards things that they normally wouldn't have just come up with themselves, if that makes sense.
Is it like kind of building up a tolerance or something?
For some not. Yeah.
So it just, yeah, it just depends.
It's individual. I could say yes, like I'm thinking of, yeah, clients of mine that absolutely was their experience. And for others, they're in full control. They're not.
Hmm. This is interesting. Yeah, it's like some of the stuff, like I remember just reading a little bit about it in our psychology classes or in the DSM, or like, and you
Mhm.
don't, but you're probably getting to see more of it in as a sex therapist.
Yeah, yeah. But it's interesting though, because even when you take kind of those quote unquote extreme sexual behaviors, I mean, we're all at the end of the day, we're all human and we want to feel connected. We want to feel safe. We want to, we want to be able to have a healthy experience.
Yeah. So what is your advice for just the average couple
Mm.
who
Mm.
doesn't want to, do the crazy stuff? Like what makes things better sexually? Like what advice do you have for just the average couple that wants to make their sex life better?
Average couple, I would say, depending on where they're at, I say start asking questions. Like create a relationship where you there's the Gottman, like they have a free card deck app that you can download, and some of the card decks are the salsa decks. So they have like mild, medium, and hot.
Hmm.
And start going through them with your partner. Like, hey, does this sound interesting? Or is that something that's more just fun to think about? You would never really want to do, or you maybe be open to, or hell no, I would never want to do that. Just start with having good conversation and being really curious. Because when you're able to have those conversations, then you're able to learn a little bit more about what your partner likes. And maybe even there's questions that you haven't even asked yourself that would be really helpful for you to be able to answer.
Yeah, because some people don't, I feel like they don't even understand their own, especially women. Women's bodies are much more complicated than men's. Like they don't even understand their own bodies.
Right, right. So definitely, I mean, TikTok is not the place to learn about sexuality.
So yeah,
And
where
pornography is not an educational source. It's fantasy. It's fun. That's not your source for education on orgasm or libido or yeah, make an appointment with a sex therapist.
okay. Besides, is there other like resources or books or classes or
Oh,
something that you
for
recommend?
women, there's it's called meetrosie.com, and there's an app. Fantastic. It was built by doctors and OBs and sex therapists, and they're just so good. Just such a great resource depending on what you're wanting. Like if you're just like not sure, like I've never been able to orgasm. Okay, great. They have a whole plan, and you can even like, how dedicated are you to this? Like 5 minutes a week to learn about this, or you have like a lot of time, and they will customize a plan for you. If that's an area that you want to explore or grow, or you're healing from sexual trauma. It's a great app. I really, really recommend that.
Wow. Okay.
Um, for my like Christian couples, I really like to recommend the book The Great Sex Rescue. And so it helps them really be able to challenge maybe some of the unhelpful messages that they probably learned through their church. Or church community, but also folds in like really healthy biblical sexuality. It's another one of my specialties is I really love working with Christian forward folks and being able to heal and have a healthy sex life too without
Yeah.
all the shame.
Well, so because I'm not real sure on every religion or what people are taught, but I know some people are taught kind of sex through their religion. They're taught that sex is only for procreation and not for pleasure.
Mm.
So, I mean, is that part of that getting past that stereotype? Because I mean, I would disagree with that. I don't know if that's
Oh,
controversial, but yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And I would say that's a misrepresentation, which is unfortunate. So for me, I'm very devout Catholic, and so I like being able to I love it when a client is Catholic because then we can speak the same language. And I can really pull in Catholic doctrine around healthy sexuality. And yeah, you're right. It's like the message is that, God created sex for procreation and pleasure and relationship.
I
And
I got to send you this one lady I was watching. I was trying to learn about sex therapy, so I was listening to different podcasts and things. And this one lady, I mean, she was so fascinating, but she had an interesting take. She was talking about this. She said there's all these different kind of orgasms, and one's an expanded orgasm. And she said that like when you have one of those, like it's like you feel God in the lovemaking, like it's a spiritual experience. And she thought maybe that's why some
absolutely.
religions don't want you to
Oh,
have pleasure, because then like you're seeing God in a different light or something, and it's like that's not what they want.
well,
But that
that's
was an interesting
fascinating.
take.
I haven't heard that. I guess what I would not necessarily counter, but yeah, I would counter that. At least looking at it through a Catholic lens is that, through Catholicism, marriage is a sacrament. And so there's many different sacraments. And so every time you have sex, you're giving each other a sacrament. So it's very holy. It's very sacred, and you're called to do that. That's a good thing. That's not something to be ashamed of. To me, I think that's beautiful. That to me, that gives you a green light. But we're not having those conversations at church.
Right. Well, yeah.
Right.
Well,
Right.
I
And
think
so
the old time thinking was it was all for men, and the women was just supposed to do their duty, right? I mean, and now it's more of like, why can't the women have fun too, right?
right, right. I like to tell folks like it's all about getting back to Eden where things were perfect and we didn't have all the shame, we didn't feel naked, right? And it was how God intended us to be and united through sexuality. And yes, God created a clitoris for a reason, and that's a good thing. And the majority of women cannot orgasm through penetrative sex alone. There needs to be some clitoral stimulation. God created that. Why? Because he expects us to communicate. He wants us to communicate and understand our differences and how our bodies respond. I think it's perfect design.
Is there, if you work hard enough though, is there, because I was listening to this lady and she was saying like women can have sex or they can achieve orgasm the other way. It just
Oh,
takes
it is.
more
You can.
time. And
Yeah.
it's like there's this whole thing with like squirting and like
Oh,
you
yeah.
could make this woman squirt and it's ejaculation, but they need to work with a sex therapist sometimes because there's some of it is a psychological block. Like
Yeah.
because there's like shame around it, right?
Yep. It's a psychological block. Again, not understanding your body, and there is a sense of tension, right? When we think about the arousal cycle, and like at that 8 or 9 where you're at that craving right before you orgasm, there's tension, and if you are unaware that it takes a bit of surrender and getting out of your head. And if you're a very anxious person, you're very in your head, it's hard to get past that.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating
Mhm.
topic, and we could talk about it for
Oh,
hours.
I know, right?
Yeah, but then like people need to see someone like you if they really want to, because it's not something you could just learn on it, like you said, on TikTok or whatever.
No, no, I don't.
Yeah.
No, right? Because you don't. I mean, thinking about like not to date us, but like our generation, like what we had, like what Sex in the City, or like what did we have?
Yeah, I remember that was like kind of a controversial show back in the day.
Yeah. Ew, it was. Yeah. And even that, like it had some good things, but it was perpetuating some stereotypes too. And so when women are watching this, it's like, well, what's wrong with me if I'm not? Right. Or maybe there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah. What is your take on that? Like speaking of Sex in the City and just
Mhm.
single people in general. I mean, I find it so fascinating because I mean, I met my girlfriend before the apps took off. And so now everyone's on the apps and swipe
Yeah.
left or swipe right. I don't even know how it works, but I know
Yeah.
that's like a big thing. And
Mhm.
a lot of people are having casual sex on these apps or whatever. Like, do you think that's a good thing that maybe they can learn about their bodies and how they react with different partners and stuff? Or is this dangerous?
Well, I mean, do they have access to protection?
Yeah,
I think
that's
it
important.
depends on what your goal is. If you're doing this to find, a lifelong partner, it's, the apps are think of it as a tool to get the person in front of you to see if you click, right? Because there's nothing. I think the Gottmans did research on this, and they found that a lot of the apps have it wrong because it's all about like compatibility. And really, relationships that go the distance until they're old and gray and falling apart and still love each other, right? It isn't necessarily about compatibility, but knowing each other and knowing how to compromise and invest in each other over and over, um, even through your differences. So compatibility kind of is out the door, and that's where a lot of these apps, my understanding, um, they're banking on.
Oh, really? So even with like sexual compatibility, like if you like having sex 5 times a week and your partner only wants it once a week, like you could still work through that as a couple.
Absolutely. You can absolutely work through that because here's kind of the good news, bad news. So let's say you do find someone that you're sexually compatible with. You have the same libido level. Well, that could change in 5 years. You're going to
Sure.
have to work through that. Or post-pregnancy or menopause or a prostate cancer treatment. And now erection isn't happening consistently or at all. And so you're going to have to be able to navigate this again if you're looking for long-term relationship.
Yeah, how do you deal with something like that where either the woman just cannot have sex or the man cannot have sex for a medical reason or temporary or permanent or whatever? Like how do they deal with that? If, especially like you said, if they were compatible and then all of a sudden prostate cancer, he can't
Oh,
have sex or the woman is pregnant, and I know I don't think you can have sex like 6 months after you have a baby, something like that. So now, how do they
Well,
work through
three
that?
months, but
3 months.
that's
Okay.
debatable. But yeah.
Yeah. So how do you work through that though?
Oh, I what an amazing opportunity. I guess that's where I would invite couples to see this as an opportunity. Yes, there can be some grief of because just like anything as humans, we don't like things to change. We don't. It's uncomfortable. We have to renegotiate things. But what an amazing opportunity to widen our scope of intimacy and how we define sex. Does sex have to be PV sex? Like, can it look different and still be satisfying? Again, right? The three-legged stool. Can it still be intimate? Can it still be mutually pleasurable? And erotic? I think so.
Yeah, a lot of possibilities are. That's true. Yeah, just so people just got to get creative.
Right. But if you just look at it through that very narrow lens of this is what sex is and this is what it should look like and this is how it should start and end, you're really limiting yourself and you're kind of setting yourself up. Um, we're not teenagers. Our bodies are going to grow and change, and so is your partner's.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything that crosses the line for you with couples? Like, because I know one of the things that's kind of been talked about a lot lately is, I mean, they're saying there's articles saying that people are gonna have sex with robots. Like that's the next thing is like these robots are gonna be like sex bots. I mean, does that concern you at
Oh
all?
yeah, or AI. Yeah, that does concern me. I'm going to be honest with you. I can see two sides of it. We've got some folks that really struggle with human connection. I'm thinking of folks that are like neurodivergent and have a difficulty, right? That could be a healthy outlet for them, possibly.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be the sex therapist for them for that, but I can see how that could be within the realm of healthy for some folks that have disabilities, where it's hard for them to find a partner that gives them a healthy sexual outlet where they're but yeah, I mean, I do have concerns about AI. I was actually just reading an article from ATSA, and I cannot remember the acronym and what that stands for, but it's for folks that are within the sex offender field. And there was an article about how there's a program that you can take a person's picture and then feed it into this AI program, and you can create basically a porn scene with that person's face.
Wow.
That becomes problematic if you're on Instagram and you upload a minor's face.
Yeah. Big time.
So technically, you're not, there isn't a victim, but there is. And so this is a whole other area of like, wow, what are we going to do about that? How do we, yeah.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Well, let me get your take on this too. I'm always curious because this is another trend that I've seen recently. And you speak of sex offenders, like we're always thinking of men as the sex offender, but lately there's been this trend of female sex offenders. A lot of female teachers are having sex with their male students.
Mhm.
I just, do you have any take on what is going on with this? It's just very interesting to me because I don't think this was a thing when I was in high school. And it's just I mean, some of these women are very beautiful women, and I'm just
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
why are they interested in a younger man? This doesn't really make sense to me.
Right, right. Well, in contact offenses like that, it definitely is this for these women, they really have a narrative and a belief that they're not doing harm,
Hmm.
right? That they really have convinced themselves that this is a relationship, that this person is capable of consent and they're not able to see that power dynamic, right? They're really blinded by that.
So they like the power. Is that what it is? They love that this person is so
It's
desires me so
romanticized.
much.
In their mind, it's romanticized. It's
Okay.
usually not like you would think like, oh, like there's a power dynamic and I'm gonna, I can control this younger person. It's usually really a hyper romanticized narrative that they have.
Interesting. Yeah, it's just interesting that that's more of a common thing in the last
Mhm.
whatever 10 to 20 years as opposed to 30 years ago. It just was very, I know there was the one in Seattle, the Mary Kate
Oh
Letourneau.
yeah, Mary Kay.
That was a
Yeah.
big one. But then she was the first. She was like the pioneer. And then now there's so many. I can't even
That
keep.
we know of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of like, from my understanding, again, I'm like a baby sex offender treatment provider, just getting into the field. My understanding is that the majority of cases are gonna not be contact offenses. They're gonna be online or pictures or
Oh,
yeah. And that's something that I try to when I have a chance to be able to educate folks on this because there might be something where like, oh, this person's a registered sex offender for having child pornography, and your brain goes to like the darkest places. But there can be a story there. For example, if you are an adult and you're more likely paying the cell phone and own the cell phone, and your child, your teenager, is using that phone, but it's under your name, and they choose to send a really sexy picture to their online girlfriend, but they don't know that that girlfriend is 3 states over, you can be charged with trafficking child pornography. That easy.
yeah.
Like, that's kind of scary, and have to register as a sex offender.
Wow. Yeah.
Right.
It's not something to mess around with. That's for sure.
No, it isn't, but it's so easy to be charged in those kind of situations.
Mhm.
So whenever I see like those alerts, like, oh, this person's a sex offender and they did this, it's like, okay, I don't know the whole story and I'm not trying to defend, right, egregious sex abuse, but we don't know the whole story.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And then you don't know, sometimes you don't know, you only know what they got caught for. You don't know what maybe they did other
Right.
things they didn't get caught for. That's always scary.
Right. Right. Like there was a woman within the county here that was picked up. She was sending pictures of her kids. She didn't think that they were sexual in nature,
Hmm.
but they didn't have a shirt on, and she was sending it to someone she knew online that she met online, and it turned out to be part of an investigation. And so technically she was producing and trafficking.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I know. It's like some people I feel like they don't even want to post pictures of their kid on
Right.
social media just for these reasons. Like you don't know what they're gonna use it for something
Yeah.
nefarious. I don't know. It's creepy.
It is. It is. And this is why our daughter's not going to have a phone. I'm going to be the unpopular parent. She always asks me, she's like, how about when I drive? I'm like, you can get a dumb phone. Like, you don't need.
Really? You're not gonna let her get her phone until she's 18 or what?
No, unless she's paying for it herself.
Okay.
It'll
Wow.
be a dumb phone. I mean, we'll still be able to get a hold of her.
Yeah, there you go. What about another hot topic nowadays is trans and that whole thing. And I just remember when I was in my graduate program in the DSM-4, they called it gender dysphoria. Is it still called that as something that's in the DSM, or is this
I think it's still
because
in the DSM, isn't it? I could do like a quick search.
I don't know. I'm just curious, like if that's something that still is that people go through counseling when they have that, because obviously they transition, but is that something you go through counseling first to kind of discuss this feeling of you're in the wrong body, and
Mhm.
then you decide to later transition, or do people just go ahead and transition?
Boy, as one person told me, is like, I can't answer that question. I know that's probably pretty annoying. But because once you've worked with one person who is trans or has detrans, that means you only worked with one person. Like
Mhm.
that's their own experience. And so I wouldn't want to like broad brush it and say, oh yeah, this is what happens, because each person has their own kind of journey. I can say that a lot of folks that do identify as transsexual had these thoughts and feelings younger, and it usually is around puberty, and just like, okay, yeah, puberty isn't fun for anybody, but I can only imagine how even more uncomfortable that is for someone who really is questioning their gender identity.
Yeah, and I think that'd be hard for someone who does transition
Mhm.
to have a healthy. Is it hard for them to have a healthy sex life? I mean, I don't know if you research that at all, like in terms of if they physically transform their body, can they still enjoy sex? Like, because it
Mm.
seems like, from what I mean, I don't know personally, but just from seeing what the surgeries and stuff, it seems like they're mutilating the genitals, and so they wouldn't be able to have, I could be wrong on this. I don't know.
From my again, this isn't like if a client came to me and said, I identify as trans or I'm in the middle of transitioning, I probably would refer out to a provider that's their
Mhm.
jam. But I certainly have researched it and have looked into it and I'm totally welcome to be corrected here. But it does sound like I'm on the same page as you are. That there is a lot of sensation and difficulty with orgasm, lots of infections, especially male to female
Hmm.
surgeries. They're awful when you think about what a person has gone through to do that. Yeah,
Yeah, and especially and with the hormones too, like
for life.
obviously as a male, if you took a bunch of estrogen, I feel like even if you didn't have the bottom surgery, but you just took the hormones,
Mhm.
I feel like because I was told, I don't know if this is accurate, but I thought I heard that some of the people that are transitioning that take the hormones, it's the same hormones that they give to sex offenders
Yeah, I've heard
to
that.
block them from having those urges.
Right, right. And that medication, and I'm totally spacing the name of it. I was just listening to something about that. But yeah, they used to give that to sex offenders. Now they don't because it's considered cruel and unusual punishment.
Oh my
But they're
God.
giving it to young people.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I have a lot of questions. And
That's a
and
whole nother, yeah. I don't
yeah,
know. I'm not an expert, but I'm just concerned. Like I was a counselor
yeah.
and my last like year or two as a school counselor, that's when a lot of the trans stuff started happening.
Mhm,
And I do remember I had one kid and she wanted to transition and
mhm.
she started transitioning. I don't know if she took the hormones or whatever, but she just started dressing like a boy, changed her name
Usually, yeah.
and
Mhm,
she seemed so much happier. So I was like, well, I don't know. Like I'm not an expert on this. Her parents are supported. She's happy.
mhm.
I don't know, whatever. Hey, whatever. I think when people are happy, but when I read about the surgeries and the hormones and the medical things, that's where I get more
I get
concerned.
I'm in general, like even like trans or issue aside, I think in the last 5 years, I've had a lot more questions about what is considered medically necessary
Yeah.
in general, right? Things that I
Mhm.
thought like, well, yeah, that's what we do, and that's
Right.
well, if the FDA says this, then I guess that's okay. I have a lot more questions now, not and that's not just around the trans issue, but I would apply it to this as well. What are the long-term effects of this, right? I mean, when I think of even long-term effects of birth control, right? We're finding out that has a lot of that messes up these women that started on these hormonal birth controls now in their 40s and 50s going through perimenopause. Their hormones are
Really?
all out of whack.
Oh,
So
I
I can
didn't know
only
that.
imagine what a person who's trans, if they're going through.
Yeah.
I just like, wow, this is like a chemical cocktail. I mean, I have questions. That's all.
Yeah. No, I have concerns, I think is more like, I mean, just look at like going back to bringing it back to what you do in sex therapy and everything is like, I mean, because I remember when I was a kid, you read about erectile dysfunction or whatever. You're like, oh, okay, well, that's something people deal with like when they're like 70. But then you start seeing all these commercials now, like for guys like my age, like in their 40s. And then like I looked it up and I was like, 25 to 40% of men aged 40 to 70 are have dealt with erectile dysfunction. Like, I mean, it must be a thing because they're selling the pills, there's or whatever the treatments or whatever there is, there are
Yeah.
commercials for it everywhere. I mean, it's like, so it's a big business and it's like you're wondering, well, what's causing that? Because I mean, and maybe that's always been that way that men over 40 started having that problem, but it seems like it's a more recent thing.
Well, I have a lot to say about that one.
Okay, good.
I think that there is a lot of, again, social stigma put on men that what defines you as a man is being able to have an erection on demand, right? And not losing it, right? And so if you're not having anything but that experience, something must be wrong. When erections come and go, it's fine, right? An erection is a sign of health, by the way. It's great. It's showing that you have great cardiac health. I have concern about men putting a lot of pressure on themselves because I want to understand if a healthy male is having erectile dysfunction, I want to know what their solo sex is. I want to know how they're masturbating, because they could be masturbating in a way that doesn't translate to partnered sex. And so then when they engage in partnered sex, it doesn't feel the same. And so then they're thinking, well, I have erectile dysfunction. Well, wait, you don't have an issue with solo sex. I have questions, right? Let's don't go to a pill. Let's not subscribe to hymns and start taking testosterone out the gate. I do take issue with the programs like hymns, or where you can just talk to an online doctor and have testosterone, because if you have heart disease, you're going to have erectile issues most likely. If you have an enlarged prostate or prostate cancer, that can affect erections. If you have diabetes, that can affect erections, et cetera, et cetera. If you're just thinking, well, I'm not getting an erection, I just need testosterone, then we could be misdiagnosing a health issue that really should get some attention. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
No, exactly. That's what I'm concerned about. Just people, I think that's just a symptom of a deeper health issue for people, that we're just unhealthy in general. And then that's just one of the symptoms of being unhealthy.
right. SSRIs can cause this, low thyroid. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Other medications. That's always would be my first question if someone's struggling with that. Is like, what do you take? Are you taking? It could just be alcohol too. Sometimes that happens.
Right. Alcohol too. Yeah, that can affect. Right.
But you're right. It could be like heart disease or diabetes, and that's like you don't want to you don't want to miss that. You want to be treating that, and then that would hopefully clear up the other issues too.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. And part of natural, I mean, aging is a decrease in testosterone in your 50s and 60s. And so your erections aren't going to be as robust. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, we were made by design. I really believe that. And so in a loving relationship, you're going to be having communication about intimacy, about different ways that we can still seek pleasure that doesn't require an erection, or that doesn't require it to look a certain way. In a loving relationship, you can have those kind of conversations.
Yeah, or with a sex therapist.
Sure. Yeah.
They need to hire somebody, because it's some of this stuff's uncomfortable to talk about. So it's nice to have you only see couples, right? Or do you see people individually?
Individuals. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say half and half of my caseload are couples and individuals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything else you want to? I can put your you have kind of like a website here, or on the Pacific Behavioral Healthcare.
Yeah, Pacific Behavioral Health is the group practice that I work with. We have an amazing team that have all these different specialties, like betrayal trauma, polyamory. I mean, all over the place. Like, we have someone for everybody. They're based out of Bellevue, but again, with telehealth, we can meet with anybody in Washington. Yeah, it's
In
a
other
good
states,
thing.
it just depends if you have to look at the certifications or something.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at the certifications and their bios and whatnot. Our admin team is amazing at really pairing people up with people that will meet those specialties. Yeah, I would say with sex therapy, if you're interested in seeing a sex therapist, go for one that is ASEX certified, because they have gone through the gamut of training. Like, I talked about a lot of different things today that aren't necessarily my specialty, but I'm informed, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that you're meeting with someone that is informed and knows how to connect you with someone if that's not their jam, right? I can't tell you how many times I've had someone, like, their first session with me, and they're like, oh my gosh, I was so nervous. Like, you made it so easy to just talk about this. And that is so rewarding, because it's hard anyway to see a counselor. It's another for these kind of issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, well, I'm sure you're doing great work, and everyone appreciates it. I mean, it's good. We need more counselors in the world, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of job security.
That's good. Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for doing this. Anything else you want to add or promote?
Yeah, not that I can think of. I'm sure I'll think of it when we disconnect.
All right. I'll go ahead and stop the recording now.
One of a kind, from the rockers to the wise men.